Greetings, RAISE community. Brent coming in live with today's guest, Kelly DeGregorio, who is the Vice President of Institutional Advancement at Boston College High School and longtime friend of Evertrue. And despite that, I know I'm going to learn new things about you, Kelly. So welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be with you this morning.
Well, we have had a lot of fun with recent guests, just learning about your educational journey. And so I would like to start by asking you to take me back to your junior year of high school. Who was that Kelly? What was she into? And what led her to Hamilton College and a little stint in Rome?
That's funny. Yeah. So what I was into was probably Duran Duran. I don't know. It was the 80s.
Favorite Duran Duran song? I mean, Ordinary World, Hungry Like a
I'm
Wolf.
Still a tiny bit into them, to be honest with you. So I actually grew up in the Berkshires here in Massachusetts in Williamstown, and funnily enough, ended up at Hamilton, which is very similar to Williams College, where I grew up. And I loved that experience, and started my career actually in New York in publishing.
Tell me more about just the decision to go to Hamilton.
Yeah, sure.
And some of the highlights. When you were you super involved? Were you just into Duran Duran? Like what was the mix?
Yeah. It was really just a feeling. When I walked on campus, it felt right. It felt good. And there's probably some familiarity having grown up in a college town with a sort of a small liberal arts college. But it was that feeling of community that I really liked about Hamilton. And so I wasn't a sports star or anything like that at school. I was a disc jockey for 4 years at the radio station. So highlight of your DJ career. What was the highlight? Well, I think the highlight was going to a really sweaty REM show and broadcasting from there. You remember those were like the big bands used to come to the college campuses. I don't know if they still do that or not, but yeah, we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun doing that. And I, the late night radio show in the basement of the building, and it was just a blast. We had a good time.
Very cool. And so, and you did a little stint in Rome, is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was interested in learning Italian, and I also was. I was an English major, and then I minored in studio art and did a lot of art history too. So I did Temple University's program in Rome for the junior semester with a couple of friends actually from Hamilton. And it was such a wonderful experience. We lived right near St. Peter's, and used to just go and hang out in St. Peter's Square and have a beer and enjoy the atmosphere. And also got to go to a lot of working artist studios through the program. So it was pretty excellent. By the time I left, I was actually dreaming in Italian. So that was really good. It's unfortunately hasn't stuck with me so much, but one of these days it's on the bucket list to be fluent again. And that's something I'm committed to doing.
Io parlo un po' di italiano.
Wait, see? Yeah, it's very Po for me.
So, who's your favorite artist, or what was the type of art that you were maybe most into then, or maybe now?
Yes, I'm really interested in contemporary artists, in particular photography. And I don't have a favorite right now. There's a couple of really great online resources, though, for people who want to collect or start collecting art and maybe don't have the resources to go to Sotheby's or Christie's or and do the big time art collecting, but that you can find emerging artists easier than ever before right now, thanks to the internet. So sites like Tappan Collective and others have really great advice and let you kind of buy what you like without breaking the bank. And these are emerging artists who might one day be good investments for you. So that's been a lot of fun.
Love it. It sounds almost like the way SoundCloud has helped, new artists musically get discovered, the same sort of ecosystem emerging for different types of art. I love
Absolutely,
it. And so
absolutely.
you had such a classic liberal arts experience at Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know what you wanted to do right out of college?
Absolutely. I wanted to be in publishing.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what I did. I worked in the marketing department at William Morrow in the children's book department, and I loved it. But my salary was $17,000 a year at the time, and didn't really love being on a shoestring living in Manhattan. wasn't that great. So, but I loved the work. I loved the team and the people. And yeah, so that was something that I had always wanted to do, and went and did it. And had there been better, a better, maybe faster track up to a livable wage, that would have maybe I'd be there still. But decided to come back to Boston, where I had a lot of connections and friends and family, of course, in this area. And when I did that, I started looking. There were a couple of publishing houses at the time in Boston. Started looking there, but then expanded my circle a little bit and ended up doing a lot of informational interviews. One of them was at Harvard Law School, and took a job there in their annual fund. And that's when my path changed.
And did you know at that point, Kelly, what the annual fund was? I mean, growing up in Williamstown, there's obviously a lot of philanthropy there, and at Hamilton, perhaps you got exposed to it. But when did you realize that this business of advancement was a business?
It was while I was at Harvard. I had only the vaguest idea of philanthropy as a profession before I got there, and that was under Scott Nichols' team at the time, who just recently retired from BU, and the team was a highly functioning team, which felt great. And that's what I've tried to look for throughout the rest of my career and tried to replicate when I became in a position to build my own team.
So you were at Harvard Law School at a time when, tell me a little bit about Scott. And I feel like the backdrop at that time was that, every day John Grisham was releasing a new book about somebody who went to Harvard Law School and then, hit it big at a big law firm. But just what was the experience working with Scott, who's been an awesome longtime friend of Evertrue's, and I'll make sure to share this episode with him.
That's funny. Well, I was a peon at the time, a staff assistant. So I wasn't out there with the high flyers. But it was, what was great about it was that, I did feel like I was being exposed to and learning from the best in the business, or one of the best at the time. It's just funny to think about now. We named a building, and it was a $3 million gift, and it was such a big deal. And that was but it just felt like I was learning how to do things the right way. And you could just kind of tell everybody there was such a pro, and that and was striving for excellence, but also just kind of having a ball while we were doing it. Oops, my lights just went out. So
all good.
That was I'm still in contact with kind of a lot of those folks later today. In fact, one of my colleagues at the law school introduced me to my now husband during that time. So that's, I owe Harvard Law School an awful lot.
I love that. And so neat experience there, just learning the ropes, understanding that this is a business. Did you love it right away? Did you like it? When did you start to think, whoa, this is not only, I was so passionate and focused on publishing coming out of college. I sort of stumbled into this space, and this could be it for me.
Yeah, it was, really leveraged my communications skills, which is, really what I did in college and what I was good at. And that, it feels good when you are playing to your strengths. And so it used a lot of those. And then, I wasn't doing direct solicitations or anything like that. I was doing the annual fund mailings and coordinating publications for the Leadership Gift Society at the time. And so that it just kind of opened my eyes to say, well, you can use these skills in other, fields outside of publishing. And that was an eye opener. So, then much later, not that much later, but later in my career, when I started being in a position to work with boards and to, do direct solicitation and to kind of build those relationships over time, I really enjoyed that part of the job too. And it was kind of a different sort of communication, that, much more direct face-to-face communication. And that was very satisfying too.
And tell me about after Harvard Law School. I know ultimately there was a move to Florida, but maybe what was your next step?
Yeah, that's so my now husband had an opportunity to take over a family business in Florida. And at the time we had a brief, I don't know why, we thought we were going to go live off the land or something in Vermont. And so I think we lasted 9 months in kind of the middle of nowhere, Vermont. But we were up there, it was snowing, it was April 23rd, and my husband said, hey, let's go to Florida and take over this business. I said, yeah, that sounds pretty good. It's snowing right now and it's late April, so I think that sounds fine. So we ended up in Florida, where I worked at the community hospital system that was at the time called Martin Memorial Health System, and it has since been bought by the Cleveland Clinic as part of their Florida expansion. So we were 2 hospitals then and built a 3rd hospital while I was there. I think I was there for 13 or 14 years at the hospital.
And so that was probably the real transition into direct fundraising, one-on-one, face-to-face versus the broader based annual fund work. And I'm just curious, when you think about some of those early experiences, obviously a different audience than Harvard Law School alumni, and everything from trying to identify a prospect to book a visit, and do a solicitation and stewardship and all of that. But were there any memories with some of those early donors that you recall where things either went really well or poorly, which is okay too?
People ask me a lot, actually, having been in healthcare most of my career and then coming back to education, people ask me a lot, is it easier to raise money at BC High from the hospital world? And I think that it depends a lot on the circumstances. Now, when I was at Martin Memorial, we were the community hospital, so it was an interesting. The community was interesting because the vast majority of people with the capacity to make major gifts were seasonal residents. And so, they would not necessarily have a relationship with a doctor at the hospital because their philosophy was, well, if I get really sick, I'm going to go back up to New York. I'm going to go back up to Boston. I'm not going to go to see a doctor here. So, but what happened was, because they're older in South Florida, eventually they did end up at coming through our doors at the hospital. So, the community aspect of a community hospital is quite different from, say, an academic medical center. So the community hospital, raising the level of care benefits everybody in the community, whether you own a business and your employees go get their healthcare there. I mean, everybody, we were the only game in town as far as where people, got their healthcare. And so that while it wasn't quite the same, at BC High, when I call an alum, they love the school so much. They want to talk about the school. So I could get visits, all day long here. That is not a problem. When you call somebody about their healthcare, there's a little bit more of an arm's length, or a little bit, it's not quite as, I guess, sometimes they're not quite as enthusiastic right in the beginning about, oh yeah, I want to talk about how I was, really sick, and then you took care of me, and so that door sometimes took a little bit longer to open. Once you got there, it was very powerful, in the same way that at BC High, it's very powerful because our alumni credit the school most often with the human being they became later, not necessarily their career, although that plays into it, but it's the kind of person that they are that they feel the school has formed. So it's the paths were a little different, but the ultimate result could be very powerful either way.
We talk a lot about the importance of polite persistence in the world of fundraising. And, I'm curious if you have examples over your career where maybe it was the opposite experience at BC High, where they weren't just thrilled to hear from you necessarily, but with the right polite persistence or positioning or relationship building, you're able to maybe move somebody from skeptic to supporter. I mean, how often has that happened?
I think it's not something I've tracked over my career, but actually I'm having a conversation right now where it's becoming apparent that the right people need to be involved in the conversation, and that's not always the person that you talked to originally. So I remember in Florida, for example, we, I worked with an older couple, and as a generational thing, that it was the husband, was in charge, even though the wife had a pretty high-powered career in the arts herself, but she deferred to her husband, and we were talking about a big 7-figure gift for the hospital, and he was resistant. There was something that you could just tell he was kind of shut down to it. So what we ended up doing, and I was pretty close with the wife, so I ended up meeting with the wife, and Joan said to me, she said, I really want him to make this gift. And she said, so we never talked, but I'm gonna talk to you about now what his thinking is and why you might be getting this kind of resistance. She's like, he's a depression baby, and he's nervous about losing control of any of his assets. He just has that mindset. And so if you can show him a way where he can just move assets from one place to another, and he still feels like they're generating income, I think he would be really interested in that. I said, well, let's talk about a charitable gift annuity. And I was telling her about that. And she said, well, that sounds, you're just repositioning your assets. She said, that's what you need to do. So then, so Joan helped me with this strategy, and, but she said, but you can't ever tell them that we had this conversation. So it reminds me of the Big Fat Greek Wedding, where it's the neck turning the head. Do you remember that? So it was the head, but Joan was the neck, and they ended up doing, I think it was a $2 million charitable gift annuity. It's a huge charitable gift annuity that they did, and then later he left a 8-figure estate gift to the hospital. So it was a good lesson for me in not only that polite persistence, but are you talking to the right person, and not making assumptions about who has the influence to make a gift happen. In
the sales world, we'll talk sometimes about the decision-making unit, right? Mm-hmm. Who's it's not always just one decision maker. Who's the decision-making unit, and then how do you understand
Right.
the competing priorities or different perspectives. And it can
Yeah.
be, sometimes you might think that because you've got a great relationship, let's say with the vice president of advancement, that it's all, roses. But then if there are other folks in the team who don't understand or skeptical or detractors, it's just always a reminder of trying to, understand who those very key influencers could be when you're not in the room. And it sounds like the
Absolutely.
same thing can apply
Yeah.
in the philanthropy, even though maybe it's like, it's not going to be a leadership team necessarily making a philanthropic decision, but husband, wife, or children, or
Yeah.
or other, influencers maybe are more influential than we sometimes realize.
Yeah, and how you approach that conversation is really important. I have also gone down in flames, there too. Like I remember another situation where I was soliciting. We had a hospital world, we had a big gala every year, and raised over $1 million every year with this gala. And so the chairmanship of the gala was really important and prestigious position, and I was recruiting somebody to be the chair of the gala, and she was she'd had a huge career in investment banking, and she'd been on the committee, and so I thought, this is a slam dunk, right? And during that conversation, I solicited her for a major gift as a gala sponsorship, and I made a huge mistake, but it was something that I always did. I always said, is this something that we would want to get together with you and Tony, her husband, about? Or because I would do that with a man too, to say, should we get together with you and Judy to talk about this? Oh, and that just crashed big time. She was so angry with me that I would assume, she thought that I was assuming that she needed to ask her husband for permission to make this gift. And oh boy, that blew up big time in my face. So that was, that was a really good lesson of how do you approach this, and ask a couple more questions first before, you get to that point. And now I tend to ask things like, how do you tell me about how you make your philanthropic decisions, and kind of leave that door open before suggesting a person or people to involve. I try to tease that out instead of coming through like a bull in a china shop.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the same. We might be talking to an enthusiastic potential partner, and they're gung ho, but then we'll often sort of say, well, shouldn't we get this in front of your general counsel? Or typically there'd be an IT review where we'd want to make sure that we go through a security assessment. And, so I guess we're always trying to sort of identify the blockers and then try to proactively guide the buyer to help get through some of those blockers. And it sounds like you were trying to do the same thing and sort of identifying, okay, why might this not happen? Well, if there's a spouse who would have a differing opinion, like you experienced in the other example in Florida, then let's try to head that off at the pass or hit it head on. But at the same time, that can really offend somebody if there isn't a spouse that needs to be involved.
Right. Yeah. So you do have to be careful, and sometimes it's something people haven't really thought about, especially if it's their first time out of the gate with a big gift. Maybe they don't have a routine when it comes to making a major investment. And so, it's something that it takes some work to get to what's comfortable for them.
Got it. So you had a really good run in Florida, no winters to worry about.
Yeah, that was okay.
And then you're like, you know what, let's head back for some winter action. So tell me about the decision to come back to the Northeast, and some of the highlights from your time at Brigham and Women's.
Yeah, sure. Well, our son was 8 years old at the time when we came back, and my husband's also from the New England area, and we really felt strongly that we wanted him to grow up, in a similar way that we did, and in particular go to school here. So that was something we had our eye on, and I had been participating for years in the Association for Healthcare Philanthropy and their conferences and teaching, et cetera. And I'd done a session in Boston with a great colleague who was at the Brigham, and we did a panel and brought some of our big donors to the panel and at a big conference in Boston, and that worked out great. I started calling around to people I still knew in Boston and some of the old gang from Harvard Law School, but it ended up being this friend from the Brigham who said, "Hey, we're in a campaign, we're staffing up. You should come up here." And so I was recruited to the Brigham to do fundraising for cancer care and women's health. And then also later on that shifted to the neonatal program, which of course is the Brigham's flagship program. Everybody in Boston had their baby at Brigham and Women's.
Tell me about that role. My understanding is you served as AVP of development, and so you had a team that you were managing. And I do feel like in the advancement world broadly, and certainly in healthcare as well, it seems like, I mean, in the sales and marketing world, I think there tends to be clearer delineation of either you're a manager or you're a seller. Mm-hmm. And it feels like that role tends to be more blended always in higher ed, where I talked to a senior vice president at a large public university yesterday who still manages a principal gift portfolio. And so I'm
Absolutely.
Curious, when you're in that role at Brigham's, how much of your time was leading that team and helping that team work their portfolios, develop strategies, get through blockers, et cetera, versus having your own portfolio as well? It always feels like a very overwhelming blend of duties, but for whatever reason, it's sort of just become the standard in this space.
Yeah, if somebody has the magic number of percentages, I wish they would share it with me, because I still don't feel like some days I feel that I still don't have that right. And it's I would say it's kind of like being a working parent, on days when you feel like you're just killing it at work, you come home and you're like, oh, we have no groceries, and then on days when you feel really like you're being there for your family, and then you miss a big meeting at work. So it's almost, it's what I really have, what's helped me greatly is to know that I'm doing a good enough job in both of those arenas, home and work. And if I feel like I'm doing a good enough job, then for me, that's where I want to be. I don't have to be perfect. And letting go of that idea of that perfection as a manager and also perfection as a frontline fundraiser, that's helped me immensely to just let that go. That wasn't serving me at all to try to be perfection in both of those arenas. So I try to maintain a balance. I try to, on times when I'm, right now is a good example of that time. We're going into a nucleus phase of a campaign. I am out of the office a lot. I'm very heavily focused on some lead gifts and recruiting our key volunteers. And with that, I'm not back at the ranch overseeing things. So I'm here at BC High. So, so I really rely on my senior people here to check, and I just check in with them. How's it going? What's the vibe? Do I need to be, would it be good for me to gather everybody together? And we do a couple things that I borrowed from hospital world too, like we do a huddle twice a week. We do a team huddle, standing in front of the whiteboard on Monday and then Friday mornings. And that's a 15 to 20 minute chance for everybody to say, we stand up in the hallway. There's no sitting down. There's no agenda. What does the team need to know this week on Monday? And then on Friday, it's what happened this week that the team needs to know about, looking into next week. And so we had set up a huddle board and have some process improvement ideas on the huddle board. And it's kind of a place to recognize colleagues. And so those kind of little tools help me feel checked in with the team when I'm really focused as a frontline fundraiser. And that's when I feel best about my work, is when I am really feeling like I'm making progress for the institution on big gifts. So that's for me, and that's transitioned a little for me over my career. I think at the early days of my career, I felt best when I felt like I was getting a team that's, firing on all cylinders. And maybe it's just because now I've done that for a long time, and now it's shifted a little bit for me. And now I feel best for myself when I feel like I'm producing as an individual performer, and the team's doing great too. If the team fell apart, I wouldn't feel very good either. But fortunately, if you build that high performing team, you have people that you can count on, and you don't always have to be there every day in everybody's face, which nobody likes anyway. So that's for me what I feel. That's when I feel like I have the best balance. And that may now, at this point in my career, be weighted a little bit more on the frontline side. And by frontline, I also mean stuff like board development, that kind of thing.
It sounds like you're almost positioning the role as principal gift officer, because that revenue generation is uniquely the thing that you can do maybe best and can really move the needle. And then as long as you've got the high performing team, that sort of helps round out coverage of the giving pyramid, for example, which I know your team's been really focused on, especially at BC High, where affinity is so high, but the gifts still don't raise themselves. And so, trying to personalize more one-to-one relationship building deeper into the giving pyramid, while you maybe spend time on the relationship building with the top 25 or 50, or I don't know how many prospects it could be that you manage, but it sounds like that's really the division of labor that you're focused on now.
Yeah, and that's been a good balance for us. And I think that, what's changed for this team is that focus on relationship building in the other parts of the pyramid. And so our annual donors, when I got here, I would hear from time to time, we only hear from BC High when it's June and it's time to make our annual gift, and it doesn't feel good. So that now that our team, in partnership with your team, is really taking that cadence to build those relationships and offer some value to our alumni throughout the year, that feels different, and that now feels more like I can focus more of my time on those more transformational gift discussions.
Tell me a little bit as it relates to a potential transformational gift discussion. One of the things that I find just continually fascinating about this space is, in almost any other sector, you've got price points, right? You've got, hey, you can have, the Tesla fully loaded, or the baseline Tesla. You can have the alternative over here. Things have prices. And in philanthropy, our price point can go from a $5 token gift to the annual fund to $500 million, which I think Western Michigan recently received a gift at that level. So there's really no other sector with that broad of a price point, if you will. And I know that we've done things from an annual perspective to try to create the giving societies, or to create, different stretch levels for folks with, hopefully some benefits or recognition associated with it. But as it relates to your work at the principal gift level, and this could be at Brigham, it could be at BC High, how do you know even the number of zeros that might be in the ballpark? And how do you really start to feel somebody out on the level of impact, the level of investment that might even be feasible? Because it's possible, somebody who could give $1 million could give $2 million, or $5 million, or 500,000. And so in the absence of maybe clear price points, how do you start to even narrow down what the range could be?
So, the old adage is, if you get what you ask for, you didn't ask for enough. That's what my old boss always taught me. But the favorite question that I use to start getting to that number is, tell me about what you're doing philanthropically at other places. And if the person if it's not their first rodeo, making a big gift, that can be very, very telling. And that can kind of give you, as a fundraiser, a place to start from. And then that gives you, you might say, like, well, would you ever consider doing something at that level at BC High? Or would you ever consider doubling that level at BC High? So that can be very helpful. Not so much when somebody's never done it before.
Tell me, let's say I'm the fundraiser and you're the principal gift prospect, and I were to say that same question, Kelly, tell me about your philanthropic work elsewhere. What, would you say, what levels have you, supported Brigham at, et cetera? And what are the responses? I mean, what would the response, are folks direct and willing to share, or are they cagey about it, or does it really just depend on the individual?
It's all over the map, but I'm often very surprised about what people will tell me about their assets, about how they are participating in other organizations. I'm often very surprised at the level of detail. If you just sit back and stop talking, that people will share. And if you have built, if you've built that relationship as a trusted advisor or trusted facilitator, then people often feel very comfortable sharing levels. And if they don't share a level, then I often will go back and ask, well, tell me more about the impact that you made with that gift. And then they may say, well, the building or what, and that can kind of give you something that you can then, go in and find out if what the amount was that way. But I oftentimes will say, in fact, I'm having these conversations right now because we're recruiting for our leadership volunteers for an upcoming campaign. And so I've been asked, like, what gift would you be looking for from me? And I will always say, like, I don't know what this right number is for you, but what I would ask is that we work together so that you make what is for you a very significant gift. And I don't usually, I know a lot of people say, well, we want BC High to be your number one charitable priority. I'm of two minds about that. I think people who are philanthropic support many organizations, and that's good. And I encourage them to do that. So I don't love that.
Sort of like we want to be your favorite child.
Right. Yeah. So I don't love that, but I do want them to really consider and work with me to figure out what for them is a very significant investment, and I wouldn't say this to them, but it should hurt a little bit. Like, it should.
That's the thing is how do you stretch without, look, you're trying to stretch impact, right? And so that means you want donors to stretch, but it's a balance without wanting to, turn somebody off or offend someone. And so, would you ever consider something like, let's just say, a scholarship is, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but it's, let's just say it's $50,000 a year. I mean, would you then be able to say, look, like, that is the impact of one scholarship, one student, to support their 4-year journey, let's say. And we are trying to secure 100 of those scholarships as part of this next campaign. And I'm wondering if you could ever see yourself considering supporting a good portion of those. Let's call it, 20 scholarships. And could you ever see yourself supporting us at that level? And like, how do you sort of make the stretch ask, or make the anchor, if you will, without making it feel like an ultimatum or, too high pressure?
Yeah, so I always show the donor, almost always show the donor the whole program, the scope of the whole impact that we're trying to do. So I was recently meeting with a donor, and we shared the entire campus master plan vision, the entire thing. This is $100 million vision, and within that, here's the impact you could make. So that was a lesson I really learned at the Brigham, because being an academic medical center and focusing so much on medical research and working with the doctors and the researchers who, wanted funding for this project. It was very, it was almost, they were trained to write grants and get funding for project X with a budget of Y. And when you're working with individuals, what we would always try to do is put that in a context of a larger program. So it's not just about Project X, but it's about this program that we're trying to do immunotherapies for prostate cancer or whatever that is. And if you can package a program and then you show somebody the entire scope of the program, and see what they say. It's just, and I don't like a menu. I never like a menu. I don't ever want to show somebody a menu of stuff. Just pick one of these. Like, that's not, I don't think that's effective. I don't think that it causes people to stretch. Nobody ever, picks the cheapest or the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu. So that's what I try to do, is show them the whole scope. And then,
what they pick? They pick the second cheapest bottle of wine.
The second. So yeah. So if you are going to do a menu, make sure that the one you want them to do is the second, the second from the bottom. So, but that's just not what I do. I like to show people the whole scope of the program, and then we talk about what an investment, what the impact they want to make within that scope, and that can open up a whole different conversation. Well, what about this? What would this cost to do? Because I'm really excited about this. Well, that would be $10 million. And then that kind of gets the number out there on the table, and getting the number on the table is often, I think, the hardest part of our job, to make that seem non-transactional. But those are some tools that I use to help get that number out there. We're always, I saw this quote, I can't remember who it was now, but it was just, I think it was on LinkedIn like yesterday. And it said something about like, we're building relationships, but we're building relationships for a purpose. And that's the thing to keep in mind. We are here to talk to people about their money, about the change that they can make in the world with their wealth. And I use wealth, it's all relative. So whether that's a $25 gift or a $25 million gift, that's what we're doing. So we're not just building relationships for relationships' sake. We are building relationships to help facilitate that gift discussion. And you got to talk about money during that. So, getting that number on the table is important, and the way that you do it is important.
Well, I also, I interviewed someone yesterday who said, look, they know what we do. Like, they know our job. And so sometimes we can dance around it, or maybe early career, you're uncomfortable talking about it, but they're in the meeting for a reason. Even if it's a discovery visit, they know what you do. And if they don't, then you probably weren't clear enough in why you scheduled the meeting. So,
it's a good lesson to learn too. I think one of my colleagues at the hospital once said somebody thought that they were talking about being a blood donor. So that's important to positioning when you're getting that visit.
I guess that would be considered in-kind philanthropy for sure.
Yeah.
So Brigham and Women's Hospital, according to LinkedIn, has 13,249 employees. BCI has 220, according to LinkedIn. So not probably 100% accurate, but orders of magnitude. That was a major change for you. And I'm just curious, like, there are going to be folks listening who work at very large institutions, perhaps in healthcare, a bunch in the higher ed sector, who've probably never thought about the independent school world, the K-12 fundraising environment that you're operating in. And BC High is a unique institution with a particular level of passion among the alumni community. But what are some of the biggest lessons or observations that you maybe wish you could share with yourself, your first week of the job, for example?
Yeah, well, I didn't set out to move from academic medicine to K through 12 education. In fact, I thought I would spend my whole career in healthcare. However, the things that I was looking for at a certain point in my career became less about industry and more about, I was looking for really productive and effective partnership with the president of an institution. That was one thing that I had to have in the next iteration of my career. I wanted to feel really good about the mission of the institution. That's, maybe that's a given for everybody, but it was something I was thinking about. And that became not healthcare, but that was the second consideration. And the third, I guess there were three considerations for me. The third was really community, both in the sense that it was important to me that I was somewhere that had that same kind of connectivity to the city of Boston that the Brigham did. I didn't want to lose that piece of it, but also community within the institution. And that can translate, it doesn't have to, but it could also translate to a smaller organization. So once I really discerned, what was really important to me in the next move in my career, it became much less about industry and much more about those three elements. And BC High had all of those for me. So, and I do like the kind of broad approach that we can have here in a smaller team. We have, at any given time, we'll have here 10 to 13 people on my team. And that, but when you're at a really large institution, sometimes you don't get that breadth of influence. And maybe if somebody becomes the planned giving donor, maybe you have to have them talk to somebody else, and you don't do that. So the narrow focus for me, it wasn't as appealing as having sort of a broader influence. So, but those were the three things I was looking for, and BC High really satisfied those. So once I could get out of that space of, I have to stay in healthcare and really decide what was important to me, then when I came here, to interview, that became very obvious.
There is a big vision at BC High right now. Tell me about where you see things going, and it's got to be pretty, I don't know, maybe even humbling, overwhelming to be talking through the $100 million, master plan, the big vision, and having an understanding of what kind of transformation comes along with that, and how the whole community can be reshaped by that level of philanthropic support.
Yeah, and I think, I really think BC High is kind of at an inflection point. And when I was just getting to know the school, the mission, BC High was founded to educate the sons of Irish immigrants at the time, in 1863, when people had signs in their windows saying "No Irish." So that connectivity with the mission and the city hasn't changed, over time. And the city, but what has changed is the city, and especially with what's going on around us physically here. We're in the Columbia Point area. We are in Dorchester, in a very urban environment in Boston. And that is the potential for partnerships with some of our neighbors as there's a lot of exciting development going on right around us. We abut the campus of UMass Boston. We have the Kennedy Institute here. There's a lot of potential partnerships that are percolating for our programs. And then we also, and I think the new leadership at BC High is obviously an opportunity to look forward and really do some things differently. Like, for example, we've established 5 centers of human excellence. And one of those is the Shield Center for Innovation. We have the Mike White Center for Leadership, the Larry Hyde Center for Global Education, Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and a Center for Ignatian Identity. And that's organized in a way that's more like a college than a high school. So these opportunities do kind of change the way we educate kids, and also the opportunities that exist in the city to bring the city to us and to have our students go out into the city is is pretty cool. so yeah, it's fun to think about where we're going to go in the next 10 years. And I think that BC High is going to really kind of rise to the top in terms of our position as a signature Boston institution.
Love that. So well said. And one final point I was just going to ask about is, it feels like you've really embraced LinkedIn in a more holistic way than I think can still be common among advancement leadership, which is changing, but it still feels like there's a long way to go. Did something click for you, or I'm just curious to get your perspective on that platform and how you use it in your role, both operationally leading the team, but also in your one-on-one relationship building.
Yeah, what happened was we started having a lot of success reaching alumni through LinkedIn. Like that, when they weren't responding to email or a phone call, they respond to a LinkedIn message. So that's what was very practical. All of a sudden, we just realized, hey, guys are getting back to us when we do this. And so that is now very much part of our regular practice. And I think we'll start doing that first now in a lot of cases, instead of wasting time with emails and phone calls that nobody answers. Like, well, let's just go right to LinkedIn and start there. And that's been very, very successful for us. People that we've struggled to reach, and especially people that we don't have an email for. Like, I don't know about our peer schools, but for us, there's these whole decades where kind of before people had a personal email, before they had a cell phone that could follow them forever. Half the time we're still sending stuff to their parents' house. So in that, in that situation, what are you going to do? Well, you can reach them on LinkedIn, and that's been highly effective for us. So now we start there a lot of the time.
Yeah, I love it, because it's just amazing how much we still see folks trying to, do email appends or address appends. And I mean, even I think in case standards to be considered a solicitable alumnus or alumna, I think the standard is still, do you have a mailing address or a phone number or an email? And yet at the same time, so many of the people who are lost alumni are more findable than ever before, yet the sector hasn't really still come to fully appreciate the sort of self-reported nature of LinkedIn, the fact that, the email address behind the LinkedIn profile will change, but the profile itself will persist. And so we obviously are doing a lot of work just on that space as well, because I think, instead of LinkedIn being an afterthought, or if the email or the phone number or the address is out of date, then go there, start there. And like some folks listening, probably the folks listening are more progressive on that front, but it still seems like there's a long way to go.
And I also think it positions us as professionals, and LinkedIn is a professional space, and people are now very accustomed to making professional connections on LinkedIn. And so it's moving sort of out of that social space into a professional space. And I think that starts the relationship off on the right foot for a professional fundraiser.
Well, I'd encourage everybody listening to look up Kelly on LinkedIn, follow her. You can see the posts that she's sharing, how she's engaging with her audience. It can be, I think, a great way even to keep yourself top of mind with some of those supporters, some of the donors that you follow, right? I can see you're liking their content, you're sharing some of the things that they're sharing. And it's just a great way to amplify the message of BC High while, building your personal brand and relationship as well. I would also just maybe in conclusion, we'll sometimes ask our guests, are you hiring? And at some, large shops that can be pretty significant. I would imagine, on that 10 to 13 team level that maybe there's not going to be as much aggressive hiring, but maybe we can make it about BC High, but just in general, why should folks potentially consider working in a smaller environment, maybe exploring the independent school world if they've ever been on the fence or have considered it?
Yeah, I think connection to mission and community. And by the way, I am hiring. So.
All right. See, look, you can't assume. You can't assume. You already taught me that on this episode, and I still assumed. So tell me about what you're hiring for.
Yeah, so I'm hiring for a senior director of campaign and major gifts, who's really going to be the person running the campaign. And then also will be shortly thereafter hiring for a major gift officer or director of major gifts. So staffing up for us, that's the version of staffing up for a campaign, also with a campaign coordinator who we already have hired. So that's happening right now. And I think those things that were important to me when I made this move are why people, should keep an open mind about what size shop or sort of perceived level of philanthropy that they'd be working on. So, shops like ours, our biggest gift was we've gotten an 8-figure gift before, and that's so you can do real major gift philanthropy in a smaller organization, and that connection to mission and that community might be something that you feel stronger about at an organization like ours.
That is a compelling pitch for all of you listening. Look up Kelly, get in touch. And if you've ever thought about making the leap to the K-12 world, there's some really special stuff happening at BC High right now. So we're at time, Kelly. Thank you, as always, for sharing perspective with me and the EverTrue team. And we're so excited to continue to partner on your journey of growth at BC High. With that, Brent signing off with today's guest, Kelly DeGregorio, Vice President of Institutional Advancement at BC High. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks a lot, Brent.